A blonde-haired girl named Sina stood on the edge of a cliff and looked at something in the distance. A girl with dark hair came up to her and asked Sina what she was looking at. Sina pointed her finger at a pillar of light in the distance. Apparently 2 more new people had arrived in this world. Sina was sure the girl had already realized that, but for some reason she asked about it. The dark-haired girl laughed and apologized, because she just wanted to check on her. She wondered what Sina saw in them. Sina reached out her hand to the sun, and said that in the former she felt the warm and gentle sun. He is a very kind and caring person. In the other, a horrible cold darkness that he doesn't want to show his real face. It was a disgusting person. The dark-haired girl smiled and understood everything. They were completely opposite souls, and she wondered what they would do to their world. Sina looked sadly at the pillar of light. She was just as eager to find out. April was the season of cherry blossoms and commencement ceremonies. The protagonist was now a second-year high school student who was anticipating the start of the school year. The guy imagined that his studies, club activities, and even possibly his first girlfriend were waiting for him around this very corner. After reaching the turn, the hero ran into someone. His new school life and romantic comedy starts right now. Apologizing, the guy asked if everything was okay. Looking closer, the hero realized that the guy he bumped into was just tying his shoelaces. Not understanding anything, the guy couldn't believe that this was the way it was supposed to be. Opening his eyes, the hero couldn't understand what had happened to him, because just now he was rushing to school. Next to him was the guy he crashed into while he was tying his shoelaces. The heroes woke up. Looking up, the guy noticed a red carpet in front of him that led to the king's throne. The king and his subordinates looked at the heroes that had awakened from sleep. The hero was shocked to see the king in front of him. He never thought that he would be summoned to another world. The hero looked at the king with a dumbfounded look and asked where they were. The king answered him that they were in the kingdom of Arcana, but the guy didn't understand where that was. The king asked for heroes to save their world, and the guy did make sure it was a hero's call. Looking at the knight and the priestess behind the king, the hero was only convinced it was all for real. But the guy with the shoelaces, in the guy's opinion, could not be counted on. The hero decided to accept what was coming and bowed to the king. He apologized for the late introduction and gave his name as Akira Yamada. He would have liked to know more, but suddenly he was interrupted by the same guy putting his hand on his shoulder. The guy apologized and introduced himself as Prince Ruguin. He asked to memorize that name. This guy woke up out of the blue, and his name was completely inappropriate for such a rude guy. The king understood their confusion, and it wasn't every day that they were called to another world and asked to save him. The king asked Mika to tell the heroes their situation, and the girl agreed. Ikiro thought Mika was like a saint. According to her, there were labyrinths here that had existed since time immemorial. Although they posed no threat, 12 new labyrinths had recently been discovered. Investigation revealed that they were more complex than the existing mazes and were growing rapidly. Ikiro didn't quite understand what she meant, so the girl decided to explain. As they are now, the strength of the heroes is more than enough to handle them. However, sooner or later they will become a global threat, so they want to ask the brave heroes to go through and conquer the labyrinths before it's too late. Mika showed a large crystal to the brave warriors that they could see in front of them. Here they could evaluate their statuses. Prince Ruguin approached the crystal that showed his parameters. Height index multiplied by 5. Ultimate burst, light magic, and hero sword. Mika confirmed that Ruguin-san was a hero, and all the people in the hall were loudly surprised by that. They couldn't understand what kind of status he had that was like cheating. The prince was apparently pleased with himself. He tilted his head and suggested to Yamada-kun to also evaluate his status quickly. This guy was only rushing him because he had such cool statuses. Ikiro guessed what might have happened, and he had a bad feeling because Ruguin turned out to be a hero. Ikiro approached the crystal and held out his hand. But still Yamada-san turned out to be such a hero, namely a holy knight. The growth rate is multiplied by 3. The skill Iron Wall, Light Magic, Protector, Trust, and Reliability skill, Guardian, and there was also a Journal skill. Despite belonging to different classes, both Yamada-san and Ruguin-san had amazing statuses. Mika asked the people to congratulate and praise those who would save their country. Ikiro noticed that people were just thrilled, but wasn't sure if it was okay. Mika looked at the heroes and addressed them. She asked them to save their world. But as Ikiro expected, he couldn't give her an immediate answer. They didn't know anything about this world, and they were just high school students. Ikiro didn't understand how they could save them, but Ryugun decided otherwise and asked the people not to worry, because they would take care of everything. Ikiro was simply shocked. Ryugun said that he and the hero Yamada the Holy Knight would have no problem conquering the labyrinths. That's what people expected from the hero San. Ikiro alone didn't understand what this guy was saying. Ryugun asked not to doubt it. After all, they would definitely save this world. All the people rejoiced at the words of Ryugun-san, who didn't even ask Ikiro anything. 3 days have passed since then. A captain of knights named Ragna Gladius had a duel with Ikiro and knocked his sword out of his hands. Ragna noticed something was wrong and decided that the hero wasn't feeling well. To get through the labyrinths, Ikiro's training was taken over by the Knight Order. The boy wiped the sweat off his face and asked for the duel to be repeated. He wondered if they could return to their homeworld. The king believed they could have. In the annals of centuries ago, there were mentions of heroes who had returned to their homeworlds. And since that was the case, the hero wanted to ask the king to be sent back right away. He had never practiced martial arts, let alone fought anyone. Besides, he didn't have the abilities of a hero, so he considered himself superfluous here. He felt that if Ryugun was a hero, he could save their world all by himself. The king apologized to the brave heroes, but they had used up all their remaining magic to summon them. It would take 20 years to restore it, but that was the same as not being able to return at all. Ikiro thought that everyone back home already knew about him not showing up at school. They must have been worried about him, and if he spent all 20 years here, he wasn't sure if his grandparents would still be alive before then. But the king didn't talk about how there was no other way. While conquering the labyrinths, they would find various gems. One of them was a wishing stone. This meant that if Ikiro obtained this stone, he could return back to the moment of their summoning. Thus, he had an incentive to conquer the labyrinths. Ikiro told the captain that he hadn't seen Ryugun anywhere, and the captain replied that the hero wasn't feeling well. The captain could understand him. After all, he was suddenly in an unfamiliar place, but it seemed to Ikiro that he was slacking off anyway. Something was bothering the hero, so he decided to find Ryugun. Meanwhile, Ryugun was walking past the castle walls when Ikiro called out to him. It had been a long time since they had seen each other, and he wanted to find out how Ryugun was feeling. Ryugun didn't understand what he was talking about at first, but remembering his lie, he looked sick and sneezed. Clutching his head, he confessed that he still had a chill, a cough that wouldn't go away, and a fever. Ikiro asked to check just in case and reached up to touch Ryugun's forehead as he quickly brushed it away. He shouted at Ikiro not to touch him, thinking that the guy dared to doubt the hero's words. Ikiro asked him not to get so angry and apologized. This hero annoyed him a bit, but to be honest, Ikiro didn't have time to worry about him. In a month from now, they were supposed to go to the maze. To train and possibly die, or to neglect training and inevitably die in the maze. They didn't have much time. Since the situation was like this, Ikiro decided to sacrifice sleep to get through it. Taking the sword in his hands, he asked to repeat once more, and so he practiced for 15 hours every day. And 10 days later, he managed to strike the captain. Of course, that wasn't enough to pass the maze. Training alone was not enough. There was another aspect that could not be overlooked, and that was the general knowledge of the world. So in between training, he began to devote 7 hours a day to his studies. But since there were also 24 hours in a day in this world, Ikiro only had 2 hours to sleep. Every time he was close to death, he was brought back to his feet with a recovery spell. 5 days passed like this until Ryugun realized that the hero was studying the world. He felt that it was all pointless when they returned back to their world. Ikiro and Ryugun's opinion was too curious and could just ask others about anything. But Ikiro disagreed with him. The only people Ikiro thought they could trust was each other, since they came from the same world. It would be nice to help each other at least a little. Ryugun agreed that Ikiro should have trusted him since he was a hero. But Ryugun couldn't trust Ikiro. After all, he's not a hero after all. Gritting his teeth and closing his eyes, Ikiro suppressed all his feelings to avoid punching Ryugun. When he entered the library, Ikiro met a girl who was happy to see Mr. Yamada, and said hello to him. She knew that the hero worked hard every day. Akira replied to the princess that she was just as diligent. The girl was embarrassed again, for she had asked Akira several times to just call her Puffy. This girl was Princess Puffy, and Akira had been meeting her in the library for the past couple days. While he spent his time studying, she would come here to do some investigations. That's how their communication was born. The princess was investigating the topic of why the development of magic in this world had stagnated. She thought that Yamada-san should take a break once in a while, and asked him not to neglect sleeping at night. Akira was embarrassed and hiding behind his book replied that he should have put in a little more effort. The boy's reaction seemed amusing to Puffy. She already had several theories, which she continued to analyze by reading various documents. The princess offered Yamada-san a little chat, and he was fine with that. He of course agreed, and the girl thanked him for his attention. But he didn't understand what she wanted to talk about. Puffy admitted that she would like to hear stories of Yamada-san's world. After a while, the hero told her a story about a crane that said goodbye to a young man and then soared into the sky and disappeared. The young man became a monk and spent the rest of his days lamenting why he had broken his promise and looked after the crane. And they lived happily ever after. By the end of the story, the princess was sobbing. It didn't seem like a happy ending at all, and the story seemed very sad to her. Akira was shocked to notice that the princess was crying, but Puffy only brushed away her tears and said that it wasn't. The princess said that she was 2 years younger than Yamada. In the end, she was just a girl, compassionate and tearful. Puffy only asked to tell her more about their world to Yamada-san. Akira thought about how the princess would be interested in hearing about airplanes, but Puffy didn't know what that was. Akira told the girl that it was a way of traveling by air from one country to another. In other words, they could travel distances that would have taken them days to travel in the blink of an eye. The girl looked up at the sky and imagined an airplane flying in the sky. She decided that if she were in Yamada-san's world, she would definitely fly an airplane. Then, she would go to a place where no one could find her. The hero looked at Puffy with surprise that it was as if she had woken up from a dream. She laughed and admitted she was just kidding. But living solely within the walls of the royal castle could be a bit depressing. Akira could never forget that sad expression on his face the moment Puffy said those words. A few days passed, and it was time for the heroes to hit the road. Sitting next to the hero, the princess didn't understand why Akira was being so hard. The hero's answer was simple: to save the world. It was a good answer, but really he just wanted to go back home. That's why he worked so hard that he didn't even have time to sleep. Still, it was for his own good. Still, there were still people in his world who were worried about him, especially his grandparents, with whom he was very close. His parents worked all the time, so for the most part, they were the ones who raised him. This was exactly what the princess expected of him. Yamada-san had a good heart and worked hard for his family. Also for the sake of Rugun-san who wasn't here. The princess smiled and asked the hero if she was wrong. But for the most part, Akira was trying for his own sake, but he thought his efforts would help Ryuguin as well. Puffy stood up from the table, having made her decision. Until now, she had always worked hard to act like a princess for her own sake. But now she would like to work for the good of the people and the person she cares for. She told Mr. Yamada that, like him, she would strive forward to be proud of herself and open up her world. It's a world of tranquility and magic development. And aside from that, Puffy's world will be like Akira's. With those words, the girl took the hand of the hero that was embarrassed. She wanted to finish her thoughts and looked intently into Akira's eyes. Coming to her senses, she let go of the guy's hand that blushed exactly like her. Unsure, the girl asked to call Yamada simply Mr. Akira. The hero was fine with that, since he and Puffy were friends. He asked the princess to just call him Mr. Akira. Getting ready to leave, Akira was seen off by the prime minister that he asked the hero if everything was alright. The king and the princess would have been happy to see Akira off, but the hero didn't think it was worth making a fuss. Just the minister being here was enough for him. The minister grabbed the guy by the shoulders and promised to do their best. Watching the hero, the minister realized that it couldn't go on like this. The hero saw that the prime minister often came by to watch him train, but he didn't think he had such a high opinion of him. The guy thanked the minister and offered to do what they could to support each other. Suddenly, someone called out to Yamada and the hero turned around. It was the captain of the knights. Just between the two of them, he wanted to say that the guy had surpassed him a long time ago. Ikiro could hardly believe it, and the captain wished him to gain more confidence. Since he had survived the special hellish training, he could handle anything. They were knights, and they too were willing to sacrifice themselves for their country and the world. Ikiro wanted to train with the captain again after he returned. After hugging the hero, the captain happily agreed with him, and Ikiro tried to say that he was hurt. Suddenly a shout was heard that asked them to wait. To the hero's surprise, it was Paffy, who promised to always wait for his return, because she loved him dearly. These words made Ikiro's jaw drop. Paffy said that when he came back, they would always be together. But at that moment, the hero didn't know something else. He didn't know that this was the beginning of all hell. The princess shouted to Ryuguin-san and ran up to hug him. Thinking she was addressing him, Ikiro froze in place, not understanding what had happened here. Now the main characters were holding their way into the first maze called the Mirror Maze. Ikiro tried to talk to Puffy, but she seemed rather aloof. Apparently, he was the only one who seemed to think that she and he were on good terms. It was hard for Ikiro to believe that all this time she had only been thinking about Ryuguin, and he considered asking her about it. Thinking about it, the hero lost all his courage. Ryuguin asked Mika if she took sweets, but unfortunately Mika didn't take anything. Ryuguin didn't understand what good she would do in such a case. Ikiro thought that there must have been a town on the way. Mika agreed with him, saying that before arriving at the labyrinth, they would stop at a town that was known for its apples. There should be a lot of stuff there. That is to say, that's what the hero thought had caught her attention. Ryuguin asked Miki how far it was for them to get to this town. The journey took approximately 3 weeks, so they had about 7 days to go. And just like that, the journey of the hero, the holy knight, and the saint continued in a heavy atmosphere. Thus 7 days passed, after which the heroes reached the city. Ikiro was delighted with the small town, which seemed prosperous to him. As they approached the building with the coat of arms, Ikiro thought it was a guild, and Mika thought the same. The hero wondered what the guild master looked like, imagining him to be a scary, pumped-up man. Mika called out to Mr. Yamada, who apologized and said he was a little nervous. Suddenly, the guild master herself named Purim came out to them. Surprisingly, it was a beautiful elf with a lush bust. She greeted the heroes she had already heard about from the king. First of all, she would like to discuss the details of the mirror maze with them. They had been studying this maze for some time now, and they had managed to find out that it was inhabited exclusively by mirror monsters that reflected magic. This meant that only physical attacks would be effective against them. She also had the heroes take the portal that was in front of them. Portals were quite useful because this way they could set them up anywhere in the dungeon and then explore it again from the same spot. The trick was to use them to go through the levels at a measured pace. All they had to do was gain some experience. In that case, the protagonists and Mika headed towards the mirror maze. At the entrance of the maze, they encountered a stone golem that attacked Ikiro. While Ryuguin covered himself from the blow and closed his eyes, Ikiro blocked its blow with his sword. He assumed something like this would happen, but it was even worse than he expected. Ryuguin tried hard to hold on to the heavy sword that was falling to the ground. Ryuguin fell down with it, saying that it was too heavy. As expected, this squad had only Ikiro and Saint from the beginning. Ikiro asked the Lady Saint how much healing magic she could still use, but the girl replied that she could heal without limit. Her magic never ran out. So if Ikiro got her arm torn off, her stomach pierced, or her head smashed, she would heal everything. Ikiro felt uneasy at her words, but that was exactly what he expected from the Saint. Since her magic didn't have a limit, Ikiro figured they didn't have a problem. It couldn't be helped. There was no escaping the danger. But Ikiro asked her not to worry and promised to protect her, even in spite of if he got hurt. Ikiro lunged at the golem and shouted to the saint that he was counting on her. After hitting the golem several times, the guy ordered it to finally fall. But the golem wounded the hero, so Mika used healing on Ikiro. Although it was dangerous, using traps, they could still break through, and that was just the beginning. The guy thought about the monsters in the dungeon as suddenly a huge dragon flew out at him, injuring the hero. Ikiro spat out blood, not realizing where this dragon could have come from. He had made a mistake. He looked at the frightened Rugwen and decided that it would be best to leave him in the castle. But if he did that, his relationship with Puffy would be ruined. Besides, they were from the same town, and he didn't want to risk going it alone. After getting hit by the stone dragon, the hero decided that he was wrong after all. Mika and Ikiro decided they should go back, continuing on. After a month, he and Mika worked well together, and Mika was able to cover for Yamada-san in battle. They did a lot of work to get a whole mountain of gold. They weren't sure what they should do next. As they went through the dungeon, not only the traps, but also the monsters became more dangerous. Ikiro thought that they should have shared the information with everyone and strategized. He asked for Mika's opinion while also thinking about Rugwen, who was apparently having fun with women again. Mika asked the hero to wait. Ikiro didn't realize what was wrong, but Mika could smell the aroma of freshly baked cinnamon apples. It was a whole apple pie. Baked apple and cinnamon pie is a specialty of this village. She was insanely glad she came here. Ikiro asked his uncle for an apple pie, and the salesman handed it to the hero. Mika couldn't believe it, and Ikiro handed the pie to the girl, whose eyes sparkled with pleasure. He asked her to gobble it up for her health. As it turned out, the saint had such a sweet side as well. The girl confessed that she simply lost her temper at the sight of sweets. Having tasted the pie, the hero decided that in all likelihood, the pie was cooked with good oil. Mika was shocked that Ikiro realized what the pie was made of. But Ikiro replied that he once cooked it for his younger sister, which made Mika even more surprised. There was a slight aroma of alcohol, and the apples were cooked well. Ikiro offered to bake a pie for Mika, and the girl couldn't believe the guy was telling the truth. But if they had groceries, Ikiro didn't see it as a surprise. Mika smiled and replied that she would look forward to it. When Mika called the hero by name, a strange warm feeling appeared in his chest. They had fought for the first time about half a year ago, and in that time they had bonded quite well. Also, Mika and Ikiro started spending weekends together often. Of course, they didn't forget their duties, and when they had good ideas to improve the strategy, they shared it with everyone. After knocking on Mika's door, the guy said he would like to add something to their strategy. Upon opening the doors, the hero saw that she wasn't there. Ikiro noticed that she often started to go somewhere, but before he could think about it, Mika came in from behind and grabbed the hero's hand. Mika was embarrassed and blushed, but Ikiro asked her to calm down and tell her what happened. Mika had one request for him, but Ikiro didn't understand what it was about. With tears in her eyes, Mika asked her boyfriend to lend her some money. It was all about just that. The neighboring village had suffered a lot after the monsters attacked, and Mika regularly sent them money. But Ikiro wasn't sure if they needed such a large amount of money just to support the village. It would be better to buy them materials and provisions for the victims. The guy didn't understand why Mika kept quiet, and the girl admitted that she had sent everything she had. She had donated all her money to rebuild the village, and now she had no money left for food. She was the ultimate saint, in Ikiro's opinion. She was sweet and caring, and was always saddened by the grief of another. She was willing to give up everything to help others. What Ikiro feared was that he wouldn't be able to bear it. That he would always be alone, but Mika was always at his side. She said that the two of them could do it together. Before they went into the labyrinth, Mika had something she wanted to tell him. The next morning, Ikiro saw something incredible, not understanding why it happened. Mika told Rugwen that it was simply beautiful, and Rugwen agreed that it was indeed a wonderful morning. Ikiro and Mika went through a dangerous maze together, but she still adored Rugwen for whatever reason. Rugwen hugged Mika and coldly told the hero that he was only dead weight to them. Because of Ikiro, the morale of their group was dropping. According to Rugwen, that's what the hero said. But Ikiro didn't understand him, because he was a hero, and how could the morale of the group be lowered because of him? Mika replied that it was only through trust that the labyrinths could be passed. And because of Ikiro, the mood in the group was worse than ever, and in her opinion, he should have taken responsibility for it. The boy didn't understand why she was saying that. Ryugwen suggested the hero to go to the maze and make them some money. and Mika supported her true hero Ryugun. Ikiro ordered him to shut up and was completely out of sorts. He promised not to leave the room for a month from now on, but a voice from behind answered him that it would be a problem. Turning around, Ikiro saw Polmi, who wanted to discuss something with the hero. She wanted to give her final thoughts on the latest research, but it seemed like they had no problems getting through the labyrinth. Right now it was like that. However, further down the line, the monsters would be better protected from physical attacks. Ikiro thought about the head's words. After all, their group was just using physical attacks. In that case, they needed a mage in the group, and Ikiro asked Polmi to take care of it. The girl knew that the hero would say exactly that. That was why she had already found the perfect candidate that knocked on the door. Polmi thanked her for arriving and told Ikiro that it was their new mage. Upon entering the room, the girl introduced herself as Angelica Wunst. She was sure there was no one better at the power of magic than her and winked at the hero. Together with Mika, they had come a long way in conquering the mirror maze, and Ikiro thought he and Mika had grown close. However, she loved Ryugun. Ikiro didn't understand what happened, but the guild leader found them a new ally to conquer the labyrinths. It was Angelica Wunst. There was no one better than her in the power of magic. There's not a person in the kingdom who hasn't heard of the Wunst family. It is a famous family that trains outstanding wizards. However, Angelica was crossed by the family as a loser. When she was a child, it was believed that she would become a powerful wizard because of her immense magical power. However, over time, one flaw was discovered. Her energy reserves were enormous, but she was only able to use a fraction of it. Therefore, she was only able to use basic magic. After that, she was kicked out of the Wunst family. She impressed the guild master with her knowledge of magic. Despite everyone's reproach, she was able to graduate from the Royal Academy of Magic. She got along well with the guild master and decided to become Ikiro's guardian. The hero didn't understand why it was him. Since they were foreigners, they could help her become a better person. Polmi asked Ikiro because she herself couldn't help her in any way. That's why she wanted to ask the hero. Ikiro agreed, and if he could be allowed, he could take her with him to the labyrinth. Polmi of course agreed and asked to remember to be safe. Angelica promised to be sure to be of use to the hero, after which she used her magic on him. Flashes of light began to blind Ikiro. He shouted to the girl that he understood and asked her to remove it. Now Ikiro realized what she was talking about when she mentioned that there was no one better at the power of magic than her. But Angelica didn't understand what the hero was talking about and looked at him questioningly. Ikiro recalled how she used light magic the other day and asked her to do the same, only with fire magic. Angelica could do it, but in that case, it would just be a set of beginning magic. All this time, the hero had been continuously exploring the labyrinth and wanted to rest for 1 month. Using this break, he and Angelica immersed themselves in the study of magic. Ikiro had already realized that the girl could use beginning fire magic. She could do it, but she didn't understand what Ikiro wanted from it. Ikiro wanted her to create many sparks, after which she would explode them at the same time. Usually magic was activated in a chain, in the order of creation, though the guy admitted he wasn't very good at it. Angelica asked the hero for help. She wanted to try to do it and decided to start by creating sparks. After the sparks were created, the girl turned them into flames. Now the sparks could be combined into a chain flame. Ikiro wondered if she could do that with water magic. The girl of course said yes, because the working principle was the same. The guy was shocked. He just gave her a little advice and she was already able to figure it out. She was just a real genius. Her family only rejected her because she could only use elementary magic. But the hero didn't understand why they didn't pay attention to her perfect control of magic. She was very much upset. Ikiro wanted to create a water blade if it was possible. It sounded cool and the girl smiled. His creativity was amazing. By creating a water stream, Angelica couldn't let him mock her anymore. This was her original magic, and she immediately created water blades out of water. While drinking, the girl admitted that she and the hero had been having fun lately. Ikiro didn't understand why she decided to say that, and thought it was because of drinking. The girl noticed that the guy wasn't prejudiced against her, and when it came to magic, he helped her enthusiastically. Angelica thanked him for everything and admitted that she didn't really care about saving the world. After all, Akira helped her to calm down and believe in herself. She thought that she couldn't become a normal magician because of her family. But he didn't despise her, and thinking about it, Angelica smiled. Akira thought that she had done much more than that. After all, she was the one who helped him. The girl hugged the guy and asked him not to cry and tell her everything. Akira had held on so far, endured the hellish training and scorn from others, and was finally able to speak from his heart. Afterward, he told Angelica everything that was on his mind. But since they are going into the labyrinth together, in Angelica's opinion, they should know everything about each other. So she would want the guy to promise her that there would be no secrets between them. Akira smiled and promised her. So a month passed, and they developed a new strategy to pass the maze. Angelica and Akira were shocked when Mika wanted to change the composition of their group, and Ryuguin agreed with her. Their formation was good as it was. Ryuguin in the vanguard and Akira was protecting the rear. Mika and Angelica were supposed to help with magic at the back. But Mika shouted that it was too dangerous for Ryuguin-san. Mika asked to change the formation. After all, they were obligated to protect the hero, and if Akira refused, they would leave this group. Mika led Ryuguin behind her, leaving Angelica and Akira in shock. Watching this couple, the hero couldn't understand what was going on. Mika was worried about Ryuguin that he was tired, but Ryuguin told her not to worry because they had her magic. Mika used healing and Ryuguin exclaimed that he was now full of strength. Akira was shocked by this strange couple. Ryuguin looked at Akira and said that this is true camaraderie. Mika asked the heroes not to be afraid, because if they needed healing magic, it was always at their disposal. Angelica thought that was silly, and said so in Akira's ear. Stupid was especially for a saint who for some reason didn't devote more time to the vanguard. Akira was wondering about it himself. Even though she had changed, they had been through many trials together and Akira could trust her with his back. There was an explosion behind Akira and Angelica shouted to the hero, which repelled the blow with her sword. Wiping sweat, the hero replied that he was fine. For Angelica, it was surprising, because the guy had dealt with him in one blow. Still, it did not seem to him, and became much easier to deal with monsters. Akira and Angelica approached the huge door, and the girl asked the guy to wait. She could feel an incredible powerful energy behind that door. When they opened the doors, they saw an angel with bandaged hands and closed eyes. When she opened her eyes, the heroes froze in horror, for she had empty eye sockets with blood coming out of them. Akira saw her coming. The angel flapped her wing, about to strike Akira, but the boy blocked it with his sword. Angelica meanwhile used bullets of light that exploded in front of the angel. The guy was shocked that this creature repelled the attack, and apparently it was immune to physical attacks and light magic. Previously, they wouldn't have been able to deal with a monster like an angel of light. Akira couldn't even believe that they were in the holy labyrinth right now. But right now, Angelica was with him. Akira needed her spell in order to destroy the angel. Angelica remembered that they had special spells, and asked for some time to prepare. Akira understood her and decided to distract the monster to himself. Angelica and Akira stood back to back. Angelica had faith in Akira, and the hero asked to rely on him. The girl asked the lost souls, the great spirits that slumber in the thick of the earth, to return to the light. She asked to direct their anger at the enemy, after which she asked Akira to retreat. When everything was ready, Angelica used the magic chain of lightning. The lightning bolts pierced the body of the angel that screamed horribly in pain. Along with her, Mika and Ryuguin also screamed. Back at the guild, Akira told Polmi everything. The monster was unaffected by physical attacks and light magic, but Angelica was able to deal with it. Looks like Polmi wasn't wrong for trusting her to Akira. But Angelica disagreed with Akira, for without him she wouldn't have been able to deal with the enemy. She sincerely thanked the guy who was embarrassed. He thought that there was nothing wrong with it. Having accomplished the task, the heroes received their reward. Handing the bag of gold to Ryuguin, Akira asked him not to let it all go to waste. Ryuguin exhaled heavily and decided that he would have to manage the money. The role of a hero was so difficult for him. Ryuguin thought it was right that the guy gave him the group's money. After all, it should be handled by the hero, and he made the right decision when he gave it to him. Mika was amazed and said that Ryuguin was amazing, and Akira thought he had made a big mistake. Ignoring them, Akira suggested that Angelica go back and eat, when suddenly someone called out to Mr. Yamada. Angelica asked to wait, and only wanted to express her gratitude for him accepting her into his group. She was ready to make every effort. With all love, the girl looked at the hero. 1 year has passed since Angelica left. This time, Ichigo was able to defeat the monster alone. He had cleared 4 labyrinths in that year, all by himself. Looking at the group's list, he couldn't understand what it all meant. Mika answered him that their powers were only for the hero. The hero couldn't be endangered, so they would stay away from Ichigo. But Ichigo yelled that they were too far away from him. They didn't help him at all, but Ryugwen thought he was doing fine without their help. He didn't see the point in risking their lives for him, and the girls were in complete agreement with Ryugwen. This whole situation was quite strange to Akira, and he couldn't understand what had happened to Mika and Angelica. There was no trace left of Mika's calmness and Angelica's desire. But there was no point in thinking about it, because right now their group was just empty words. Akira needed to head to the labyrinth and kill the monsters. It was pretty simple. According to the king, there were 6 mazes left. If he continued at the same pace, he could return to his world in 1.5 years. While he was thinking about it, someone apologized to him. It was a girl who introduced herself by the name Alice Gladius. Gladius was the daughter of a knight captain that she would like to meet a hero. Akira apologized and said she was mistaken. Alice couldn't understand why Akira had a holy sword in that case, but Akira replied that the hero himself had given it to her. He lent him his sword to finally kill the monsters. Akira introduced himself and said he was a member of the heroes group. Alice bowed and asked Akira for a favor. She would really like to fight Akira. Alice Gladius had been practicing with a sword since she was a young girl. Dreaming of becoming a knight, she spent all her time in rigorous training, all in order to become a worthy wielder of the holy sword. She decided to find out if the hero had given him the holy sword. But frankly speaking, the captain of the knights thought that it was not important in whose hands it was. The main thing is that it is a powerful weapon of mankind. It sounded as if he had to give up his dream. Alice wanted a battle with the holy sword. She came here to challenge the hero to a duel to see how strong she is, and Akira agreed to it. After reaching a clearing near the forest, the heroes prepared for battle. Alice called her name once more, after which she drew her sword and went into battle. Akira fended off Alice's blows. As expected from the daughter of the knight's captain's daughter, each of her blows was very powerful. He could barely block them, but due to her straightforward nature, her attacks were easy to predict. The girl smiled and admitted to the hero that she had heard something about him from her father. Akira was surprised. The captain said that he was a strong opponent who had gone through hellish trials. In just 1 month, Akira was able to defeat her father in a duel and conquered the mirror maze single-handedly. Akira decided that the captain had overpraised him, whereupon he became embarrassed. He couldn't afford to lose to Alice, who also blocked Akira's punch behind his back. Akira recognized that she was amazing, and it was a shame to end the fight. He wanted to keep fighting her, but the guy knocked the sword out of her hands, and Alice admitted defeat and surrendered. Her tears flowed, and she tried to cover her face with her hands, unable to say anything. Sitting with the girl until nightfall, Akira hoped she would calm down. Alice looked up and said that everything was fine. She thought the boy was worthy of wielding that sword. Akira asked her why she thought he wasn't worthy. Akira wanted to know if the girl could trust him with her future. The girl blushed all red, thinking that Mr. Yamada had confessed to her in this way, but Akira didn't mean it at all. Just when they were fighting, he noticed that Alice was as flexible as water, but if he added flexibility to her movements, she would become even stronger. Alice couldn't believe that she could do it. If she didn't mind, Akira could accompany her in training. Those words made Alice blush and sweat even more. But Akira said that it wasn't like that, and that he only meant training. The hero asked the girl if she had calmed down. After catching her breath a little, Alice apologized. They had a lot of work to do, so the training would be very intense. If Alice got tired, they could restore her stamina with potions. In other words, they would train the same way Akira did at the castle. Akira and Alice agreed to meet at 6 in the morning at the training ground. Alice relied on her master, and the guy asked her not to call him that. She understood, after which they finished their training for the day. Walking home, Ikiro noticed that the girl was following him. He thought she was staying at a hotel, but he didn't expect that she was staying at the same hotel as him. To achieve the same skill, she had to be as close as possible with the matcher, but Ikiro asked her not to say anything stupid. The girl hugged the shocked guy and suggested they live together, but Ikiro shouted that it's not going to happen and asked her to let him go. Waking up in the morning, Ikiro thought that yesterday had been a busy day. He hadn't had so much fun in a long time, and now he would be practicing with Alice. Just when he thought he couldn't relax, he noticed movement from the side. Ikiro was shocked when Alice appeared next to him, wishing the hero good morning. He couldn't understand what she was doing here. Alice thought that a student should sleep with his master, so Ikiro asked her to get dressed first. Alice offered him breakfast first. Alice asked the boy to open his mouth, but Ikiro could eat himself and refused. But Alice considered herself his student. She had honestly lost in a duel to the Holy Sword, and if even she couldn't feed the master, she wasn't worthy of following the path of chivalry. Ikiro decided not to argue with her. Alice was just thrilled that she was able to please the master. After breakfast, they headed towards the training ground. While Ikiro was fighting with Alice, no one could see their movements because they were too fast. People were wondering how long the heroes had been practicing here. They came every day for the opening of the guild. People were shocked when they found out that the guys had been practicing for 11 hours. When they were tired, they drank a recovery potion. No one had ever seen potions used like this before. Alice hoped that it would take quite a bit more to reach the master. Noticing that Ikiro was distracted, the girl decided that now was the time to strike and swung her sword. As she swung the sword towards Ikiro, she managed to scratch his cheek, and was just happy that she had succeeded. The guy praised Alice and said that she did well. Ikiro suggested calling it a lightning cut, but at the same time, the girl suggested calling it a double cut. There was an involuntary silence between the characters. Walking down the street, Ikiro decided to ask Alice what she wanted to accomplish, and the girl hesitated. For example, Ikiro wanted to return to his world, and assumed that Alice wanted to join the Order of Knights. For a moment, the girl lowered her gaze sadly. Before meeting Ikiro, she wanted to follow in her father's footsteps and dreamed of joining the Knights of the Kingdom. The hero was surprised that this might have changed. She used to dream of becoming a captain of the Knights and protecting people from monsters. However, now she wanted to become someone who could walk shoulder to shoulder with the hero. Ikiro was understanding, after which he shyly took his gaze away from Alice. They decided to talk business, as they had to head to the next maze soon. Alice wondered when they were performing, and the hero wondered. He suggested that they prepare everything tomorrow, and set off the day after tomorrow, so that in about 3 days they would be there. In that case, Alice suggested that they take a break from practicing tomorrow and prepare well. Ikiro decided to check with the girl if she really wanted to go with him. Alice didn't understand what he was talking about. After all, she couldn't leave her master. But Ikiro was going to go to the most difficult labyrinth, and it's a very dangerous place. He couldn't guarantee that nothing bad would happen. But Alice understood everything and was sure that she could stand up for herself. Still, she was going to follow the master, and promised to always be by his side. Ikiro was hesitant, but Alice insisted. More than anything, she didn't want Ikiro to be alone. So, 3 days later, they went to the labyrinth. After apologizing to the woman, Ikiro asked her to give the letter to Ruguen, and the woman agreed. It was necessary to get back to the inn to Alice's house faster. On the way, Ikiro met Ruguen, whom he hadn't seen in a long time. Ruguen asked them to try their best to save the world. Ikiro only realized that Ruguen hadn't changed at all. Princess Puffy and Angelica were still clinging to him, even though Ikiro shouldn't care about that. Angelica was ready to destroy all the monsters that would get in the hero's way. And Mika was going to relieve the hero of all the wounds and fatigue. Ruguen asked the girls not to fight over him and live as friends. After noticing Alice, Ruguen decided it was the right time and asked Ikiro's opinion, who didn't understand anything. A hero, a saint, a sorceress, and a knight seemed like the perfect team for a hero. Alice looked at her wizard, which he turned away and suggested that they move on. After this incident, the heroes faced their next battle, where Alice cut the enemy's steel shield in half. Leaning against the master's back, the girl looked at Akiro. Annoyed, the girl looked back at the group of hero that was behind them and covered by the magic shield. Ryugun was hard to even call a hero, which Akiro agreed with. Even though he was a hero, he clearly didn't want to be one. To Alice, everything became clear. Akiro's class was the Holy Knight, but he was also not without sin. The most important thing for him was to listen to his heart and firmly follow his path. Alice was in awe of her master. Upon encountering a formidable foe, it became clear to the boy that it was a maze of blades. Alice asked the master to tackle it alone. Attacking the enemy, she used a double slash that cut all 6 of the monster's arms. After defeating the monster, the girl raised her sword and shouted to the master that she had won. Akiro was happy for her and praised the girl. Taking his sword, Akiro threw it to the surprised Alice, who managed to catch it. The hero offered to use the sword, but Alice didn't understand how she could use the master's sword. But Akiro thought otherwise, for she had devoted her whole life to the way of the sword. He told Alice Gladius that she was worthy of using this sword. With or without it, Akiro was still her master. This was what he called a deep relationship. Alice took the master's sword in her hands and couldn't hold back her tears. Descending deeper into the dungeon, Akiro told the girl that they were close. He motioned for them to walk forward, where a field with a pile of blades stuck in the ground awaited them. There was a whole field of swords in the moonlight, and the heroes didn't understand where they came from. One of the swords glowed, and Akiro asked Alice to stop. Nervously watching the sword, the entire group of heroes silently froze in place. They couldn't figure out what it was. Although it was slightly different, it was either a magic blade or a holy sword. The hero didn't understand anything, because all this time he had been killing monsters with this blade and thought it was a fake. The sword rose up in front of the group and shone with an even more blinding light, which alerted Akiro. He ordered Mika to use the barrier. But Ryugun didn't understand why it was necessary if Akiro could just go and destroy it. They didn't want to waste their strength. Angelica supported her character Ryugun. She asked Akiro to do what Ryugun said and hurry up. Angelica struck the blade with a chain of lightning, after which the sword fell and stuck into the ground. Ryugun wanted to show Akiro the true strength of a hero, and Angelica had full trust in her hero's decision. Akiro couldn't believe it was the same lightning chain. It wasn't serious. Angie usually attacked the enemy until she destroyed it, but now she didn't even leave a scratch on it. Akiro couldn't understand why she did that and what was going on in her head. After all, she had studied magic with such passion, and now the hero couldn't understand what had happened to her. Akiro sighed sadly and thought about the fact that he would also like to have magic. Angelica couldn't understand what his problem was and was surprised he didn't know it. The hero was just shocked. It just couldn't be. But his parameters also had advanced light magic. He was so busy practicing that he didn't even have time to look. Angelica couldn't figure out what the hell kind of training he was doing. Angie recalled how they had developed the rain spell and said that Akiro could use it too. The hero was so excited about it that he couldn't believe it. But he was a beginner and didn't understand how to use magic yet. Angie decided to explain everything. She knew some light magic spells and could teach the guy the basics. First of all, one had to learn how to release magic power. In order to do that, it was important to have a clear understanding of the process. Akiro concentrated and tried to visualize the light magic flowing into the sword. Looking at the sword in his hands, Akiro stretched it out in front of him and tried to visualize the magic. Unexpectedly, the sword shimmered and covered in light, which surprised the hero. He shouted that he had succeeded, but the main thing was not to lose concentration. Now, in the guy's opinion, he looked like a holy knight. Angie smiled and thought that Akiro clearly had a talent for magic. But Akiro thought it was all thanks to her, since she was a good teacher. The girl blushed and asked her not to embarrass her like that again. After so much effort, Akiro finally reached his goal, but for some reason he wasn't happy about it. The sword began to glow again, and the hero asked everyone to hide behind it. A beam of light flew out of the sword and headed for the hero's group. Akiro couldn't figure out what it was, but he realized that he couldn't stop it with a normal barrier. But he didn't have time to hesitate. He just had to stop it and use the Bastion's skill, after which the beam collided with it. A magic seal appeared in front of Akiro, which held back the beam's attack and absorbed it. It was a spell that could dispel light magic. Akiro created it together with Angie. Akiro started to worry if everything was alright, but Ryugwin didn't understand why Akiro was procrastinating and ordered to kill him. Akiro couldn't stand it and asked him to shut up. This attack he stopped, but he wasn't sure if he would succeed next time. Alice called out to the wizard. Apparently the maze boss had appeared right in front of them. The dragon-skulled monster silently looked at the guys and waved his hand. He could control the blades, and Akiro could hear the spinning blade behind him. Alice shouted to the master that there was danger behind him. The boy turned around and dodged the first blade, but several more flew towards him and started hitting the hero from all sides. Alice asked the master to leave it to her, and Akiro agreed. But Angie interrupted her and used a rain of fire. Ryugwin shouted to her that it was great and told her to keep it up. Angie was willing to listen to the order, but Akiro thought something was wrong here. He noticed that Angie's magic was getting weaker, and he didn't understand why that was so. While he was thinking about what happened to Angie, a blade was thrust into his back. Another blow followed, and the guy was horrified to see that his left arm had been severed from his body. Akiro screamed in pain and, covering the wound, asked Mika for help. Mika was going to heal him this time too. But the second time, she asked not to dream about it. Mika was a true saint who was always willing to help the weak, but that wasn't the case now. The girls asked Akiro to use the barrier faster, but while the guy was coming to his senses, a beam of light headed for Mika and Angie. Mika used the holy barrier and Angie the water barrier. But Mika was horrified when she saw the barrier collapsing. Angie also noticed her barrier cracking in front of her, and Akiro decided that the barrier wouldn't hold. In an instant, the defense shattered into shards, knocking the girls back. Akiro was worried about Alice and didn't know what they should do next. If nothing was done about it, they would all die here. He was no master now, and while he was thinking it over, Alice managed to barely get to her feet. She asked Akiro to leave the enemy on her. Taking up her sword, she wanted Akiro to believe in her. The hero thought she was right, and looked at Alice with surprise. He wasn't alone, and so he understood everything, telling the girl that he believed in her. It was impossible to hesitate now, and Akiro used dissipation. The guy shouted at the blade that he had 7 seconds on him. He used his magic power of battle enhancement wholly. A timing of 7 seconds appeared above the hero's head, and Akiro rushed into the attack, destroying the Clickney. He was succeeding in destroying them, but he only had 2 seconds left. When there was only 1 second left, one of the blades flew through Ryugwin's body. The countdown ended, and Akiro destroyed all the blades. Ryugwin, meanwhile, was crying, for he didn't want to die. Mika and Angie were horrified that their hero had been wounded. It looked like Akiro had overdone it, but there was nothing that could be done about it. He was only worried about Alice. Alice looked at the boss that clasped his sword and stood in the stance of a knight commander. Akiro was surprised that the boss stood in such a stance. Suddenly, he attacked Alice with a cross punch, and Alice had a hard time blocking it. She noticed her hands began to tremble. This punch was different from her father's movements, and it was nothing like him. The girl closed her eyes, holding the sword in front of her. She tried to focus and pronounce that she was Alice Gladius. She couldn't let herself be fooled by this monster. If she lost, she would let down her master's trust, and she couldn't let that happen, so she swore on her knight's honor that she would defeat it. Alice attacked the boss using a double cut. All that was left of the boss was a skull-shaped head that thanked Alice and disappeared. With trembling hands, Alice held her sword and cried, for she had succeeded. Alice threw her arms around the master and shouted that his apprentice was able to defeat the monster. Akiro praised her and said that she had done well. He stroked her head as a sign that she did a good job. Alice was happy and brushed tears from her eyes. Akiro suggested to go home in that case. Running up to the others, Akiro asked if they were all right. Ryugwin and the girls were gloomy and didn't answer him anything. Akiro thought they looked fine and asked them to wait while they helped them. Mika meanwhile tried to heal Ryugwin, who was writhing in pain. It was quite far to the portal, and Akiro asked them not to exert themselves if they couldn't move. He offered Ryugwin to help him by running up to the hero. Akiro was suddenly pierced by the thought that they had been transported to another world. and that he would only be able to return home after 20 years. Even if there was a possibility of returning sooner, dangerous labyrinths had to be conquered. Ryuguin had never helped him and was the ultimate bastard. It was very painful. There were also many moments when he wanted to drop everything and run away. Despite this, he was able to accomplish a lot. All thanks to the support of Puffy, Mickey, Angie, and Alice. Without expecting it, Akira noticed how Alice bowed to Ryuguin and asked for permission to serve him faithfully. He couldn't believe that everything was happening all over again. Ryuguin had always taken from him what was dear to him. From the moment they met him, they were completely changed. Because of Ryuguin, their good souls were drowning in mud. Unable to bear it, the guy chopped off Ryuguin's head so fast that he didn't realize anything. Ryuguin's head fell to the ground, and Akira looked at him with hatred. The long-haired girl sat in the field, still looking wistfully and sadly at the pillar of light that shone in the distance. In the Kingdom of Arcana, there was a hidden valley where many butterflies flew. One of the butterflies landed on a girl's finger as she suddenly heard a rustling behind her and turned around. Crouching down next to the exhausted and injured boy, the girl looked at him and reached out her hand to him. Taking his head in her hands, the girl touched his forehead, which was hot. Akira was unconscious and wondered where he could have gone wrong. He thought that he shouldn't have taken Alice into the maze. Rather, he shouldn't have even taken her in his group. He didn't realize what he was even fighting for. The picture of Ryuguin's severed head flashed before him and how the girls were watching him in horror. In fact, he had long ago realized what those feelings were gnawing at him inside. However, he decided to just ignore them. While the girls were in shock, Akira shouted to Mika, which was echoed with fear. Akira asked not to let Ryuguin die. After all, not much time had passed, so he could still be healed. Mika immediately ran to the hero. A light appeared, and after a while Mika said that she was done with the healing. Akira thought that Mika was afraid of him, and the girl lowered her gaze, turning her head away from the guy. Akira was silent for a while, then asked Mika to use the world law. The target was Akira, Ryuguin, and the three girls. Mika was shocked at this request. Having understood everything, the girl began to conjure and summon scales. The hero asked the created scales to direct them to their lives. In other words, to put their lives on the same scale. As a counterbalance, he would like to ask for something. From now on, Ryuguin's group had to take care of themselves. He asked Angie to be true to the path of magic, and he asked Mika to continue saving lives in the same way, and Alice to continue to train hard and become an excellent knight. Those were smug requests. Akira only wanted their wishes to be fulfilled, all to please his selfishness. And Mika asked in that case to start. Akira asked her to do so. However, he could no longer hide his feelings. There was nothing more he could do now. Before the face of a god, one cannot hide the truth. Mika asked the light and darkness that are located in the stream of wisdom to weave together the threads of the oath. Akira thought that the girls wished to become such themselves, but the truth was not known to him. The scales began to fade and Mika told the hero that the conclusion of the vow was complete. When he left, Akira didn't think they would meet them again. He was running away, and the girls looked at him in surprise. He didn't want to go back and brush off his decisions. He couldn't trust anyone, and he just wouldn't have the strength to do so. Akira mistakenly thought he liked them. He hated himself for being overly trusting and having a complete lack of experience with girls. He could still feel himself chopping off Ryuguin's head with trembling hands. Akira was terrified, and all he could think of was to run. He had to disappear. Run to a place where no one could find him. The hero ran until he was exhausted. With tears in his eyes, he didn't know where to go. He only knew that he could not survive alone. Going deep into the forest, he wanted to see someone, because he didn't want to be alone. Breathing heavily, he stopped and looked around. Akira could not understand whether it was the forest or the mountains, not realizing where he was. He asked himself to calm down. The wilderness was dangerous, but not as dangerous as the maze. For now, he had no choice but to keep running. Slipping, the boy fell to the ground with a scream. He had traveled a great distance without realizing if he was still in the mountains. Not even a road could be seen. Akira heard a noise behind him, which turned out to be a huge boar. Turning around, Akira was surprised by its sudden appearance. The boar rushed swiftly at the hero that he managed to block his sword strike. But unfortunately for Akiro, his sword broke in half. In that case, the guy decided to use magic, but he didn't have any strength left. Akiro realized that he had run out of mana. The boar did not hesitate and hit the guy in the back, which shrieked in pain. From the force of the blow, Akiro bounced off the ground a couple of times, and then fell into a pit. Standing on his knees, the hero agonized in pain. Akiro realized that the boar had not left yet, and decided that it would be better to stay here for a while. The boy prayed and begged for the boar to leave, and the footsteps began to move away. Cautiously peering out of the hole, the hero decided that he was gone. Climbing out of the pit, Akiro noticed mushrooms right in front of him. He was too hungry, but he didn't realize if it was okay to eat these mushrooms. But he had no way out. One day he was so hungry that the sounds from his stomach were like howling. Even though it was dangerous, he needed something to eat. Plucking a mushroom, Akiro decided to give it a try and took a bite. Tears flowed from his eyes as the mushroom was too sharp. He was terribly thirsty for water, which was not here. But after running a little farther, he came across a pond. Akiro exclaimed that water is life, and began to drink the mountain water. He thought that the rocks could purify this water. The water tasted okay, and even tasted good, so Akiro decided to drink more. Several hours passed like this, and going further and further away, Akiro's stomach rumbled more and more. Clutching his stomach, it was hard for Akiro to ignore these pains. So he wandered around for about a month. In a month, he had already gotten used to living here, but he shouldn't relax. Strangely enough, he hadn't encountered that boar once since then. Fortunately, the other monsters were not so dangerous, although if Akiro met them in this state, he would not be able to defeat them. He was very hungry since he hadn't eaten anything for so long. Akiro decided to ignore his hunger and came across a large tree with fruit. Thinking it was food, he immediately remembered the incident with the mushrooms, and they were a bit scary to eat. Looking at the fruits, the guy hoped he would be lucky this time. Looking closely, they looked like the Isekai'd from his world. He decided that they were definitely Isekai'd, and at his own risk, he decided to bite off the fruit. Chewing the fruit, he was surprised at how sweet they were. Akiro thought he had hit the jackpot and had plenty of food. As he plucked some more, he thought about how delicious it was, and how long it had been since he'd had a proper meal. But just when he thought of that, his stomach seized up. Akiro realized that his whole body started to go numb, deciding that he was going to die like this here. As he fell to the ground, he realized that he needed to get up because he could be attacked by monsters. Barely conscious, the guy looked up at the girl that appeared in front of him. He could not understand where the man came from, but he noticed that the girl was very beautiful. Sitting down, the girl stretched out her hand to the hero and was glad that he was still alive. Opening his eyes, Akiro couldn't realize where he was. He remembered what had happened to him, and he heard someone's voice. He decided it was useless to try, because he couldn't move a finger. The girl wrapped her arms around his body, but Akiro couldn't understand what she was doing to him. Everything was like a blur, and suddenly the girl kissed him on the lips. Barely opening his eyes, the guy felt something. It was bitter, and realizing everything, he asked her to wait. The girl sat on the guy, licking his tongue, and Akiro asked her to stop doing that. But she didn't stop, and Akiro could still taste something bitter. The taste was just awful, but it seemed to be some kind of medicine. Akiro began to realize that he was being kissed, and it was his first kiss. It seems like he started to gradually regain his strength, and he saw a childlike girl in front of him. The girl told him that he almost died. It was the same girl he saw in the mountains. If she hadn't found him, he would definitely be dead by now. The guy tried to talk but couldn't, and the girl said it was okay. He had been unconscious for almost a week. Akiro couldn't believe he'd been lying there for so long, and it turned out she'd been taking care of him the whole time. The girl put her hand on his cheek, saying that everything was okay and she understood him. Leaning against his forehead, she asked him to let go of all unnecessary things and just rest. That's how he met the white-haired girl that asked him not to worry about anything. Frankly speaking, their kiss shocked him. She didn't have any evil intentions, and he couldn't move, so she gave him medicine. And so time passed until the guy couldn't get up. While he was unconscious, she still continued to give him medicine in the same way. That thought made Akira blush. The girl confirmed it, since he couldn't drink it by himself. It turns out that when he was unconscious, she kept kissing him. She was saving his life, and he was doing that to her. Akira blushed more and more and tried not to think about it. But he did think about the fact that her lips were so soft. The girl covered him with a blanket and told him to go to bed if he wasn't feeling well. That's how another 2 weeks went by. Thanks to her support, Akira fully recovered and was able to stand on his feet. He was grateful to her for saving him and thanked her again. The girl replied that it was nothing special. The hero remembered that he had not yet introduced himself. The guy gave his name as Akira Yamada, but asked to be called just Akira, and the girl quietly said his name. The girl decided to call herself by that name as well, and she called herself Sina. Sina asked to be called simply by her first name. Akira decided to elaborate, saying that she had a beautiful name. In that case, he would like to stay here for a while longer, but he suddenly remembered the time. He couldn't understand why he was staying here if he had already recovered. It was clear that he had already been declared a criminal in the kingdom for harming a hero. He didn't want to inconvenience Sina. He thought it would be better to leave soon, but Sina replied that she didn't care. She didn't care and asked him to stay with her as long as he wanted. In that case, the guy apologized to her and thanked her for everything. He had lost everything and didn't know where to go. In addition, he had completely lost faith in people. However, with Sina by his side, he felt that he could trust someone again. It was probably weird to ask, but Akira decided to ask Sina what kind of hut was this. Sina looked at the guy in surprise, and the hero apologized, deciding he was wrong to ask that. He was just wondering who built this hut here, and where the furniture and utensils came from. He was surprised that there was a house this far away, so he decided to ask. Sina replied that this house was built by her teacher. Akira asked again, and Sina confirmed that it was her teacher. It seemed to the guy that she didn't want to talk about it. Perhaps something unpleasant had happened to her. But Sina avtettled that this house was made of multi-faced demonic wood. The hero didn't understand what it was, but it sounded very scary. Sina said it was a weak monster and it made a lot of noise, so she and her teacher killed it. It lives by drawing life and magical energy from the soil. Also, all the dishes were made from the monster, and the futon and clothes were made from threads of demon silkworms. Akira couldn't believe that she was talking about this seriously. Those little guys were releasing a lot of threads, so it was easy to collect them. Akira couldn't think that they could be used in such a way. Sina noticed that Akira hadn't fully recovered yet and asked him to rest after he finished his work. The hero went to bed, determined to regain his strength quickly, but something was in his way. Sina was already lying next to Akira, and the hero couldn't understand what she was doing. Blushing, he decided he shouldn't do it, but Sina replied that they would sleep together. During the night, the hero woke up, but Sina was no longer there. He decided to go outside and open the doors. The night breeze was very nice, but Akira's attention was caught by some light in the forest. Looking closer, Akira was surprised that it was Sina. Akira froze in place as he watched the girl dancing into the night. She noticed Akira behind her. He couldn't put into words how beautiful it was. This was Sina's way of expressing her gratitude to the god. But the hero didn't understand what she meant. Sina was thanking God for always keeping them safe. It was also a ritual for her to comfort the god. A god who was mired in demonic energy. Akira didn't understand anything about demonic energy again. Also, her dance was to protect the god. Sina didn't tell him much, but he could see how important it was to her. Perhaps she had some special mission in this world. Sina told Akira that she would like a rice omelet for breakfast, and the hero agreed to make it. While Sina ate, Akira told her that he was on the mend, and thought about how he was going to be well soon. Sina thought the same, and the guy asked her to chew first then speak. She asked to leave everything to her. After all, she wanted to persistently take care of him. But Akira thought that he was more worried about her after all, though it was probably for nothing. They decided to practice a bit, and Sina asked the hero to lower his hips and focus on his stomach. Now that everything was right, she said the most important thing was to breathe properly. From his belly to his feet, afterward to his head and fingertips. He had to feel the energy spreading throughout his body. The guy clenched his fist and thought about the energy. But he didn't understand what energy was, so he asked Sina. Sina answered that energy is just energy. But Akira thought he could understand better if she explained. Sina looked at the hero with an intimidating look and couldn't understand what was unclear. She thought that Akira didn't like the way she was teaching, and the guy felt a terrible evil aura from Sina. He tried to say that she was a great teacher and that he only wanted to learn from her. Bowing, he asked her to continue. Sina immediately came to her senses and continued. So the hero began to train. After a few weeks, apparently he began to feel this energy. Akira decided to check with the girl to see if this training would help him with his recovery. Sina was sure of it, that with the training he would regain his former strength, in addition to gaining new strength as well. Suddenly, they heard some noise and turned around. It was the same monster he met in the mountains, a huge boar. The girl gestured with her hand and asked the hero to stay behind her and said she would sort it out. The hero was shocked and could not believe that Sina could deal with such an enormous thing by herself. The boar with destructive force attacked the girl, who calmly dodged all his blows. The guy was worried about her, but Sina decided to show him what energy was all about. Reaching out her hand to the boar's nose, the girl emitted light and used destruction. The boar immediately fell to the ground in front of her, and Akira found it hard to believe that she had done it with one hit. It seemed to the boy that Sina had dealt the boar a single blow, but it was more like she had just touched it. She defeated it with just a light touch of her hand. Akira was shocked and thought that was the energy. Sina replied that they had enough for breakfast. She told the hero that before, all of his strength depended solely on skill, but such strength was not real. She believed that such strength was worthless. Now he was very weak, but the hero replied that he could handle it. First of all, he had to learn to feel the energy with his body. He wasn't quite sure how to do that. Sina asked him to try to figure it out. Akira thought it was useless. He felt as if something was missing. The hero took a deep breath, and Sina said he was missing his breath. It was necessary to learn how to breathe properly. She meant breathing technique, as Akira realized. Sina asked him to close his eyes and breathe calmly and deeply. One had to try to feel the energy. The boy closed his eyes and tried to concentrate. He needed to concentrate and feel something in his body and memorize the feeling. Gathering the light energy around him and visualizing it, Akira decided he had found it. He was struck by the power of the energy, after which the hero fell to his knees. Sina smiled and said that he had made it. She was worried about the guy's well-being, and he wanted to say that he wasn't bad, but he couldn't move. Feeling the energy was the foundation of the basics, and the next thing to do was to learn how to circulate it in the body. Akira thought that the girl was joking, since he could barely manage to feel it. However, he was determined that he would do it. Thus began his training in energy control. The hero practiced hard every day, and they spent the afternoon practicing together. When they wanted to eat, Sina would go hunting and bring back a bear. One day, Akira also went out for food, and only brought back a mushroom that was inedible. Sometimes he had some free time. After opening the doors, the hero looked at the terrible downpour outside and suggested to Sina to have a day off for today. Sina was in agreement. After all, rest is also part of training. The guy was pleased and thought of something to do. Noticing the shelves of books, he asked for permission to read them. Sina let him and told him that these books were left by the teacher, so he could borrow them anytime he wanted. These books seemed to describe other worlds, and the hero became curious. The first book that he found was The Tale of the Night and Other Tales. The second was called The Dream of Love, which was a romantic story. The third was Love's Kiss. Akira immediately put everything in place, and Sina wondered what happened. Akira replied that nothing happened. Covering himself with a kiss of love, he said that this book looked interesting, and as it turned out, Sina liked it too. Hiding his flushed face behind the book, the guy said he would read it in that case. Sina thought Akira was strange. Magic, labyrinths, history, myths. Sina's teacher had left a wide variety of books. Almost everyone had a little bit of information about this world. While Akira was reading a book, Sina fell asleep right on his shoulder. He smiled, for he had already forgotten how nice it was to shorten his time. The days spent with Sina never let him get bored. That's how a few days passed. As he practiced, Sina told him more about energy. Feeling the energy, the hero began to look at magic differently. Sina noticed that Akiro was doing well, but it was hard for Akiro to believe it because he hadn't advanced at all in energy circulation. Sina knew there was no need to rush, and the guy decided that he really had plenty of time. Sina replied that he was too slow, but she was the one who told him a couple seconds ago that he shouldn't have rushed. The hero was in charge of preparing the food and left it to Sina to remove the blood from the carcasses. He didn't know how to do it himself. When Akiro got lost on the mountain, it was horrible. But that was a long time ago, and he told Sina that everything was ready. The guy served the dish, and Sina thought the food looked very tasty. She said a prayer and thanked him for the food. After that, she stuffed her mouth with food, talking about how delicious it was. The guy was surprised watching Sina. It wasn't like she had to eat so much rice, and the hero didn't understand why she was eating so much. In fact, Sina did not need to eat. Apparently, it was just enough for her to absorb natural energy. However, eating alone was boring. Even if she didn't need it, the hero would prefer to eat in company. Except, he tried to explain to Sina that he ate very little. But it seemed to Sina that they ate equally with him. But before stating such a thing, the guy asked to look at the number of plates in front of her. She had eaten a single kilogram of rice, and Akiro couldn't understand how she had so much in her. Sina asked Akiro to listen carefully, for she never lies. She asked to see Akiro how much divine light was coming from her. So she wanted to eat more, so she asked the hero to make some sweets. Akiro was shocked that she wasn't full yet. They had a limited amount of ingredients. Although the last time he made sweets, Sina was overjoyed. The guy agreed, but said he didn't have enough ingredients for the sweets, so he decided to make a cake. Sina really wanted to ask him to do it. After a while, the hero served Sina a pie with jam. Sina's eyes sparkled at the freshly baked pastry. She thanked Akiro for the food and was crazy about the taste. If he had apples, Akiro could make an apple pie, and Sina wondered. She told Akiro that she would like to try apple pie. The guy laughed and said that if they found apples that he would definitely make it. Sina made him promise, and Akiro swore on his little fingers that he would make her apple pie. One day, the hero had a dream. He recognized the room he was in. It was like an inn near the second labyrinth. It was absolutely certain Mika and Angie had gone to Ryuguin. That's why the place was so empty. Mika smiled at Akiro and reminded him of his promise. She was really looking forward to him making her apple pie. They were friends and wanted to go through the mazes together. That's what he thought, so he brought her the pie, but he couldn't do that anymore. But Ryuguin looked at the pie and said he hated sweets. But the hero didn't bring the pie for him. Just then, Mika replied that she didn't like sweets either, and that the hero was right. But that was a lie. But since he brought it, Ryuguin decided to try a slice. Covering his mouth with his hands, Ryuguin didn't understand how it was possible to eat something so sweet. There was also cinnamon in it, which seemed disgusting to him. He couldn't hold back and thought he was about to vomit. Mika yelled at Akiro that if the hero got sick, he would be punished accordingly. She called Akiro an idiot and didn't understand what he was going to do about it now. But it wasn't like that. Mika ordered to get rid of that trash immediately and apologized to the hero for his action. The cake was crushed, and through clenched lips, the guy apologized to Ryuguin. Just then, Akiro jumped up on the bed, waking up from his dream. Sina looked worriedly at the guy who was breathing heavily. He didn't want to remember the group, so he tried not to think about them. However, he still sometimes experienced such moments in his nightmares. Sina reached for Akiro's tears and asked him not to cry. After hugging the hero, she tried to calm him down and told him that everything was okay. Akiro covered his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he realized that he had fallen asleep again. His face was right in the sleeping Sina's chest, and Akiro jumped up. Sina opened her eyes and wished the hero a good morning, and he returned the favor. After stretching, Sina admitted that she was hungry, but it was still only morning. Upon reflection, the guy realized that Sina was treating him as usual. She asked the hero to make breakfast as soon as possible and served him an empty plate. Akiro couldn't believe that she was that hungry. He remembered that they still had some eggs left and decided to make an omelet in that case. Sina smiled and asked him to make more, and the hero agreed. Ikiro practiced all day and fell to his knees from exhaustion. While he was trying to catch his breath,
Sina told him that he did well.
his training was progressing better than Sina had anticipated. The hero understood how to channel energy through his body, and he had a good result. Sina figured it was all because she was training him well. As a reward, she decided to show him one technique. There were celestial wolves in this part of the forest, and the hero needed to catch one of them and bring it to Sina. Hiding behind a tree, Ikiro realized that Sina was right. Looking at the wolves, he counted at least 3 wolves. There was a whole pack of them. In addition, their ability to fly would cause him a lot of problems. They attack in packs like regular wolves, and it took effort to catch even one. Ikiro threw his head back and shouted that he was pissed off. The wolves got angry at the sight of Ikiro and flew to attack. The boy prepared to strike. After hitting the wolf with his fist, Ikiro couldn't understand why he couldn't do it, because he had put energy into his fist. While he was thinking about it, one of the wolves attacked the hero with a beam of magic, which Ikiro dodged and hit the wolf with his body. Grabbing the wolf by its wing, the guy hit it on the head, after which the wolf fell to the ground. Enraged, Ikiro shouted at it to follow him. Running up to the rocks where the girl was sitting, the hero shouted to Sina that he was on his way. Sina asked the guy not to stop and told him to hide behind a rock. Ikiro didn't understand anything but ran to hide behind the rock. Not understanding anything, he turned around and saw the wolf already lying on the ground. Ikiro didn't understand how it happened, since Sina hadn't even touched him. Coming out to the hero, Sina replied that the person who taught her this technique called it a spatial strike. After thinking for a bit, the hero understood everything. Sina had forced the energy through the stone and hit the wolf. That was correct, but it wasn't all there yet. She made the energy fluctuate violently inside the wolf's body, causing it to die. This technique didn't depend on his strength or skill. This was what true strength meant, which Ikiro was simply amazed by.